This video consists of two Malaysian cases from 2015 to 2025, which are related to the extent of application of common law AMP, equity in Malaysia under Section 3, 5, or 6 of the Civil Law Act 1956. These cases are first instance cases only. There are no appeal cases and interlocutory application cases here. Our report is derived from MLJ only, and it is an original case law. Our reports are not from CLJ or any other law report. The following elements, which are brief facts of the case, issues related to the application of common law AMP, equity in Malaysia, decision for the issue, ratio decidendi, stare decisis, and overall judgment of the cases, will be presented relating to the application of common law AMP, equity in Malaysia.
Brief facts about this case is that in Malaysian Airline where the first defendant, D1, worked as a stewardess or flight attendant, the plaintiff was a pilot. The second defendant, D2, worked as a pilot for an airline based in Singapore.
Married couple. They exchanged vows on March 3, 2007.
On June 23, 2008, D1 gave birth to a girl, referred to as the child, during the course of their marriage.
Plaintiff asserted that because he and D1 had been involved in a relationship since 2005, he was the child's biological father. The plaintiff further asserted that he had routinely sent D1 money for the kid's upkeep up until about August 2014, when she closed the bank account into which money was paid, and that he had spent a lot of time with the child since her birth until December 2013.
The plaintiff filed an originating summons in November 2015 asking the court to order a DNA test to be done on the kid to establish her paternity.
The OS was changed into a written action for trial since the matter had contested factual issues. She ended their relationship in January 2014 after learning that he had been having extramarital affairs. The plaintiff claimed that he did have a relationship with D1 throughout the months of August, September, and October of 2007, the time during which the child was most likely conceived, but that D1 never disclosed the precise date of the child's conception. D1, on the other hand, claimed that since she only spent that time with D2, the plaintiff was not the child's father. In January 2008, according to the plaintiff's testimony, D1 informed him that she was expecting his kid. D1 denied this. The plaintiff submitted photos and video of himself eating, playing, and enjoying different outings and vacations with D1 and the child throughout a 5-year period from the time of the child's birth to December 2013 as evidence.
Issues related to the application of common law AMP, equity in Malaysia. Whether this court has the power to order a DNA test on the child to determine whether the plaintiff is the biological father of the child, and if so, ought such an order to be made?
Of the issue. Although the Court of Appeal is correct in its assessment that paternity and legitimacy have historically been separate legal entities, we question whether this perspective should be true moving forward. It may be time for Malaysia to follow suit after the availability of DNA testing prompted necessary modification of the laws governing the determination of paternity in a number of states. However, it is important to take into account the challenges that DNA testing presents. The use of assisted reproductive technologies, second families, step-parents, and adoptions can all complicate the process of only relying on biology to establish parentage under the law. Sadly, if the current statutory presumption can only be refuted by showing that there has been no access between husband and wife, Malaysian law will have significant trouble expanding its family law jurisprudence to keep up with these evolving contemporary challenges. Section 112 could first be changed to give the court the option of using DNA analysis or other scientific proof to support or refute legitimacy in court. However, there should be statutory rules on how a court should exercise its discretion, with the best interests of the child as its first priority, when doing so with regard to a person under the age of 18.
Ratio decidendi. Case law is filled with rulings that the courts lack the authority to order adults to produce deoxyribonucleic acid, or DNA, samples in civil actions in order to establish a child's paternity. The question of whether the courts might mandate that a child take a DNA test to establish the child's paternity has never been debated or settled. In this noteworthy decision, a prima facie case was produced due to a deluge of evidence showing that parties having an extramarital affair had intercourse during the child's conception phase. Additionally, there was abundant documentary proof of a close bond akin to a family unit. As it was in the best interest of the child to know her biological father, the child was accordingly ordered to undergo a DNA test to conclusively resolve the ambiguity as to her paternity.
Stare decisis. 1. In the case of Stoneworld SDN BHD and Ingere M SDN BHD 2020 2 MLJ 208, according to this ruling, the court may extend its inherent jurisdiction to any situation that necessitates it in the lack of clear statutory guidance or when injustice or abuse may otherwise occur. Accordingly, based on the Court of Appeals ruling in Stoneworld v. Ingere, the courts nonetheless possess the inherent authority as parens patriae to order the taking of DNA tests on children in order to establish paternity, even in the absence of any statutory or common law authority to do so.
Stare decisis U2, case of Babu Remialayam Veal Vividya D/O Santhini Calathant Padithidal Veal. FC, number 507 of 2014, R. The judgment of the High Court of Kerala in its judgment to distinguish between paternity and legitimacy to establish a child's legitimacy in this situation, Section 112 of the Evidence Act is used, which explicitly addresses the question of whether the kid was born into a recognized marriage or not. It was emphasized that this portion serves as definitive proof of the child's legitimacy upon the maintenance of a genuine marriage and that it can only be refuted by providing evidence of the couple's lack of access to one another. Because of this, even if a child's paternity was established through a DNA test or another scientific method, Section 112 of the Evidence Act would not prevent the legal presumption of the child's legitimacy under this section.
Overall judgment. P's originating summons was denied by the High Court for two reasons. The first is that Section 112 creates a presumption that the existence of a marriage is conclusive evidence of a child's legitimacy, and the only way to disprove this presumption rather than through the use of a DNA test is to demonstrate a lack of contact between the spouses. A declaration of illegitimacy, in the event that the DNA test reveals P to be C's biological father, would append C's family life, hence allowing the DNA test was not in C's best interests, according to the second argument.
This video explains the case PT Kuryasumadan Indonesia v Ocean Masters Marine Services SDN BHD AMP. Brief facts of the case. The plaintiff, PT Kuryasumadan Indonesia, was engaged in a commercial marine deal with the defendants, Ocean Masters Marine Services SDN BHD, and a third party in relation to provision of marine-related services to a vessel. The legal rights and liabilities of the parties involved in the maritime arrangement then emerged as a source of dispute, especially with respect to duties and responsibilities in case of the delivery of the said services and the claims of the parties. The dispute entailed maritime and mercantile issues, which is a section of law that is not comprehensively captured by Malaysian written regulations. Consequently, the court had to decide on the legal principles to apply to the dispute, i.e. whether English common law principles should be used to supplement the Malaysian law. Issue related to the application of common law AMP, equity in Malaysia. Whether English common law principles relating to mercantile and maritime law may be applied in Malaysia pursuant to Section 5 of the Civil Law Act 1956 in the absence of local written law governing the dispute. Decision on the issue. The High Court made the decision that English common law principles of the maritime and mercantile law came to play and could be counted upon to resolve the conflict between the parties. The court granted in the agreement that Malaysian written law failed to provide thoroughly on maritime issues on circumstances under consideration and thus allowed application of English law as supplementary base as stated in Civil Law Act 1956 based on lacuna. Ratio decidendi. 1. Rights to locus standi. The court held that KSI had the necessary locus standi to bring the action. The claim was founded on a breach of the contract of carriage and bailment, rather than on the tort of conversion. As such, the issue of ownership of the goods was not decisive in determining whether a breach of contract had occurred. The court emphasized that even if JMM did not own the goods, KSI could still sue because the dispute concerned the improper performance of contractual obligations under the contract of carriage. Accordingly, JMM lacked the legal entitlement to take possession of the goods. Stare decisis. The court considered Clause 6G of the Sapphire Line House Bills of Lading, which purported to discharge the carrier from liability within 9 months from the date of delivery. However, this contractual limitation was shorter than the period provided under the Hague Rules and was therefore held to be unenforceable. The defendants sought to rely instead on the 12-month limitation period under Article 3, Rule 6 of the Hague Rules. The court, following established judicial reasoning, held that Article 3, Rule 6 does not apply to claims for misdelivery. This is because the Hague Rules govern the carrier's responsibilities only until the discharge of the cargo, and not its delivery. Since misdelivery occurs after discharge, it falls outside the scope of the Hague Rule overall judgment. The court ultimately ruled in favor of KSI, holding that ownership of the cargo did not pass to JMM due to non-payment of the purchase price. The court emphasized that the transfer of property was conditional upon payment, and since this condition was not fulfilled, ownership remained with KSI. Furthermore, the title to the cargo did not pass because KSI never released the original bills of lading to JMM, which were necessary to effect a transfer of ownership. The court also found that there was a breach of the contract of carriage by Ocean Masters in Sapphire Line. The cargo was released without the consent of KSI and without the presentation of the original bills of lading. This release was in direct violation of the agreed documents against payment arrangement, under which delivery was only permitted upon payment and surrender of the relevant documents. By failing to comply with this requirement, the carriers acted in breach of their contractual obligations. In relation to locus standi, the court confirmed that KSI had the legal right to initiate proceedings against Ocean Masters in Sapphire Line. This conclusion was based on the fact that KSI retained title to the cargo at all material times. As the lawful holder of the bills of lading and the party with continuing control over the cargo, KSI was entitled to enforce the contract of carriage and seek remedies for the breach. The court further observed that the Bills of Lading Act 1855 was applicable in Malaysia through Section 5 of the Civil Law Act 1956. This provision incorporates relevant principles of English commercial law into Malaysian law. The application of these statutes was significant, as they recognized the holder of the bill of lading as the party entitled to rights over the cargo. As KSI retained possession of the bills of lading, these statutory provisions reinforced KSI's rights and supported its claim against the carrier. That's all from us. Thank you for watching our video. If you like this video, don't forget to press on the button to subscribe, like and share this video.